Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and discuss this issue. Before I begin, I want to recognize my colleague, Dee Schwartz. Together, we have been working for the past few years on a book which I dare say will be the definitive book on UNRWA's history and the formulation of the Palestinian demand for return, the Israeli decisions, the Arab and Palestinian decisions, and the international community decisions that have led us to being in the situation that we are today. So UNRWA, to use the title of the panel, does not have sins. It has a sin, only one, of which all the others, whether it is the advocacy or the textbooks, are symptoms. The sin of UNRWA is its very existence. Why? Because no other entity, organization, expresses so clearly the idea that Israel, Zionism, the notion of a Jewish sovereignty in this land are temporary. And because Israel and the Zionist project and Jewish sovereignty are temporary, it is therefore reasonable to uphold an entire structure, ethos, belief system that is predicated on the assumption that this project is nearing its end, sooner or later. And this is precisely what UNRWA is. UNRWA is not a permanent organization. Amazingly, it is a temporary organization. It was established as a temporary organization because naive Americans and Brits actually thought they would solve the issue by resettling and integrating the refugees at the end of the war. The Arabs, and especially the Arab Palestinians, had a very different vision. UNRWA was the means by which the war would continue. The Arabs had failed in preventing the vote of partition. To their credit, they were very clear at the time that should the vote of partition pass, they would take violent means to prevent partition, which they did. They lost the war to prevent partition, the war to prevent the establishment of the State of Israel. But as far as they were concerned, that war never ended. This is why the green line is a ceasefire line. So many people make the mistake of calling the 67 lines borders. But the Arab states after the war made it very clear that these are not borders, that they are ceasefire lines in an ongoing war. A particular battle may be lost, but the ongoing war to undo the Zionist project, that war is very much alive. Over the last 70 years, Israel has been successful at pushing back at many elements of that ongoing war. The military invasions of Arab militaries ended in 73. There is little left of the Arab boycott. Much of terrorism is at bay. UNRWA remains one of the primary bodies, elements that keeps alive the notion that Israel is temporary and can be rolled back. And therefore, the Palestinians can legitimately believe, generation after generation after generation, that they will return. Now, one of the most beautiful insights that Adi had as we researched the book is that when the Palestinians speak of return, they do not speak only of physical return, even though many of them by now have not even physically been in the territory to which they claim return. But it's not only about the physical part, it is also about the temporal part, the time. When Palestinians speak of return, it is also a return in time to a mythical, beautiful, pristine era before Zionism messed it all up. This is the vision that is upheld by the very existence of UNRWA. And nothing will help, no reform. I'm sorry to say what the Canadians are doing is pathetic. To argue for neutrality of staff of an organization that by definition cannot be neutral. It is a Palestinian organization for Palestinians, for the Palestinian cause, with a thin UN facade, but a very important UN facade. They cannot be neutral. So the entire discussion of advocacy, textbooks, all of these are symptoms of an organization that keeps alive the Palestinian ethos of rolling back Zionism to that pristine era when it didn't exist. So this is the sin. There is no other. And UNRWA has been very skillful over the years at masking that sin, at letting people think that whatever we see, the anti-Semitic cartoons, the rockets under the school chairs, the textbooks, that these are aberrations that can be addressed. They are not aberrations. They are the thing itself. And the only way to deal with it is to deal directly with the thing itself. And I'll use an analogy that some of you might not like, but I can tell you that it is very effective, especially me as a labor, two-stater, peace-seeking person speaking to Western governments. I tell Western governments and diplomats this: if your policy on the settlements looked like your policy on UNRWA, it would look like this. Dear settlers, go settle everywhere you want in Judea and Samaria. We will never tell you that you will have to leave. In fact, we're going to give $1.5 billion to your project. And since it's a final status issue, we don't want to prejudice it, so go ahead and do whatever you want. But we do believe that when the day comes to negotiate in good faith with the Palestinians the partition of this land, you will do so in a way that will allow for the establishment of a viable, contiguous Palestinian state. Obviously, they think this is absurd. But this is precisely what their policy on UNRWA is. What it does is this: it tells the Palestinians, go ahead, keep believing, generation after generation, that one day Israel will be gone. You can believe in that as a realistic, immediate possibility. We will contribute $1.5 billion a year to you believing in that. It's a final status issue, so we don't want to prejudice it. But we trust you that when the day comes to negotiate a peace agreement with Israel that finally gives Arab legitimacy to the idea of an equal, permanent Jewish sovereignty in this land, you will do so in good faith. Ultimately, UNRWA represents the idea of Arab maximalism. And just as the world is obsessed with settlements as the representation of Jewish maximalism, it should be at least as equally obsessed, or lay off the settlements, but at least equally obsessed with UNRWA as the marker of Arab-Palestinian maximalism. When Palestinian leaders say that they support a two-state solution, they recognize Israel. How many of you have heard? But they recognize Israel. They support two states. They said that. But when an Arab-Palestinian leader says that they support a two-state solution, they recognize Israel, but at the same time they say the right of return is holy. It's individual. It belongs to every person in generations in perpetuity, which is what they say. And it cannot be negotiated away collectively. No Palestinian leader can negotiate it because it belongs to every Palestinian individually. Well, when they say that, then the only two-state solution they really support is an Arab state in the West Bank and Gaza, and another Arab state to supersede Israel. That's the only two states they have in mind. So if we are ever to promote peace, yes, that word, we need to be very clear that just as the Jewish people need to understand that they cannot have it all, because they are not alone here, the Arab Palestinians need to understand that they will not have it all. They are not alone here. There is another people with a legitimate claim, and it is high time that the international community started telling the Palestinians, enough. You will not have the state of Israel. You will not have return. You do not have a right of return. There is no such thing. The only right you have is the universal right to self-determination. It is the right of all peoples. And once you have your state, you can enact a law of return. But you have no right of return into the sovereign state of Israel, and it is high time that you recognize it. Thank you.